Glad that you joined us today for the second day of Climate Week. We're here because everyone has a role and a part to play in taking climate action to avoid the largest impacts of climate change. And the big numbers, the United Nations has called for a 45% reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050. And states and countries have all made their own commitments to reaching these targets. But something that may be more meaningful and, of course, closer to home is the urgency that we can feel just based on the aftermath of Helene and the devastation to Western North Carolina community caused by that climate-fueled storm. And so there are a lot of things driving our participation this week. And thankfully, we have this ready to go. There are 8 virtual sessions happening this week. And they're all designed to help close the gap between climate concern and knowing how to take action. So businesses and individuals and governments all have a role to play. And we are very grateful to have over 30 professionals that are joining us this week to help accelerate the use of known climate solutions. And so whether you fall into the category of business, individual, or government, nonprofit, we're happy to have you here. We hope you'll take advantage of all that the week has to offer. Just a word about EarthShare North Carolina and why we are putting together Climate Week. Our vision is to foster a collaborative community of nonprofits and businesses and individuals who are dedicated to a sustainable future for generations to come. And so we provide opportunities for individuals and businesses to actively participate in the work of the 25 nonprofit organizations that make up EarthShare North Carolina. And so these organizations are working for clean air and water, healthy places to live, safe food to eat, clean energy future, all of those things that we need for a healthy environment and quality of life. So that is about us. I want to share a couple of housekeeping things. We're going to ask you to submit your questions through the Q&A function, and we'll have a time for panelists to address those. And then on the last 5 minutes of the call, we are going to carve that out so that you can take a survey to let us know your experience from the call and anything that you would want us to know to make them more effective. And to thank you for completing that survey, we do have a drawing for 5 gift cards from Great Outdoor Provision Company for all those people who submit the surveys throughout the week will be entered into the drawing. So that is the housekeeping. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for today, Matt Abel. Matt is the Executive Director of North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association. He works across sectors to help drive policy solutions that will transform North Carolina's energy market and create pathways to decarbonize electricity, transportation, home building, or the building sectors. Matt is also the producer and host of the Squeaky Clean Energy podcast, which I shared yesterday. I listened to, and I'm not very good about listening to highbrow things. Maybe it's not so highbrow, it's just more technical than I usually have in my daily podcast listening, but it is worth a listen. So if you haven't checked it out, you should. And with that, I'm going to say, welcome, Matt. I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Heather. Good morning, everybody. And I appreciate all of the kudos and shout out to NCSEA and the Squeaky Clean Energy podcast, although you are probably giving us more credit than is due. I don't know if I would consider our podcast highbrow, but it is a good way of keeping up with what is going on in the clean energy ecosystem in North Carolina. So I'd encourage you to subscribe to that on whatever platform you're listening to podcasts on. So my name is Matt Abel. I'm NCSEA's Executive Director, and NCSEA, the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association, we are one of those member nonprofits that Heather talked about a little bit earlier that comprise the entire Earthshare NC nonprofit network here in North Carolina. And I'll also use this opportunity to share praise for the Earthshare team and helping to organize this first, well, I guess actually now second iteration of Climate Week NC. But this is really the first in which we have a full blown out week of virtual sessions and an in-person summit at the end of this week. So lots of exciting things going on. We've had a lot of great panels yesterday already and much more to come later this week. So if you haven't already registered for the summit at the end of the week, I would encourage you to come visit with us in Greensboro for that. So with that, I want to go ahead and just share a brief overview about the topic that we will be covering today, which is solar as a business strategy, or solar as an opportunity for businesses here in North Carolina. So I do have one or two slides. Well, I say one or two, a few more than that, but I promise I'm going to keep it really short because you all are not here to listen to me. You're here to hear from our fantastic panel of experts. So with that being said, I'm just going to skip through. I gave you a quick background on NCSEA. We're a nonprofit organization that operates all across the state, focused on clean energy policy advocacy. So I do like providing some of these statistics at the beginning of a presentation just to share how much momentum we currently have in the clean energy ecosystem in North Carolina. I think some of these stats often surprise folks. North Carolina is number 4 in installed solar in the country. At one point, we were number 2 in installed solar, just behind California. We've got more than 105,000 clean energy jobs across the state. And the Research Triangle area is number 1 in clean tech patents per 1 million residents in the country. So we've got a lot of momentum going on here in terms of clean energy development and companies that are developing the IP and deploying all over the world. But we also are a leader in businesses and individuals and utilities deploying these technologies in front of and behind the meter in North Carolina. And so the focus today really being on businesses, and this being an opportunity for businesses to meet your own sustainability goals, but also reliability and cost savings as well. So I did want to just quickly highlight NCSEA aggregates all of the solar systems that have been installed across the state of North Carolina, utility scale, commercial, and residential. And we've got the map of all of those systems that have been installed on our website. And here's just a quick snapshot of all of the commercial systems that have been installed across the state. And when I say commercial, essentially these are businesses that have installed solar on their roofs as a way to either meet sustainability goals or lower their utility bills. And so I know it's a little hard to see on here, but there are a bunch of blue dots all across the state showing where these systems have been installed. And we've got almost 1,700 businesses that have installed commercial PV systems throughout North Carolina, and a lot of capacity that is currently available. So if you're interested in digging in, seeing where these systems are, you can drill down by county or jurisdiction. You can visit our website and see where those are located. And I like to cover, this is solar specifically, but also just renewables in general are a business strategy that large corporations across North Carolina have embraced. And thus far, we've got 86 companies in the state that have set a goal to be powered by 100% renewable energy. And 41 of North Carolina's largest 50 private employers have set targets to increase their use of renewable energy. So this is something that is in action, and we're seeing businesses fully embrace clean energy thus far to date. We also have a map on our website, and you can see the URL on the bottom left here that shows all of these businesses that I just talked about that have already deployed clean energy on site and have set some of these commitments as well. So lots of names on here that you'll probably be familiar with. You'll see some of the big tech companies like Amazon and Google and Meta, but there are a lot of other companies that maybe you haven't heard of on here as well. So I'd encourage you to visit this URL to drill down and see some of those businesses across the state of North Carolina. So why are companies considering solar right now across the state? well, as you might have heard, and you probably are seeing on your utility bills, utility rates are going up. And this really stems from some of the rate case proceedings that were occurring at the Utilities Commission last year, in which the Utilities Commission approved rate increases, especially to cover fuel cost increases that the utilities are seeing from fuel cost volatility associated with natural gas. And so we've seen some pretty wild spikes in fuel costs, which have led to pretty significant rate increases for customers across the state. And so either you as a business or you as an individual will have probably seen some of those on your utility bill every single month. Additionally, aside from the cost savings, as we know, again, from a business perspective, that utility bills are some of the highest costs of operations to kind of maintain what your core business is. There's also a reliability perspective as well here. For a lot of businesses out there that are manufacturing or data centers that are out there as well, you need to be able to maintain operations 24/7 a day. And as we've seen, especially over the past week, there have been more and more frequent instances of more severe storms throughout the region that have been impacting grid reliability. I think back to almost 2 years ago now with Winter Storm Elliott, where we had rolling brownouts throughout the region. That posed some significant challenges to businesses who needed to keep the lights on. And so you're seeing businesses really embrace solar and storage and other technologies behind the meter to ensure that they're able to keep the power on in instances of these severe storms or severe grid events throughout the region. So I highlight these as some of the reasons why we are seeing businesses really embrace solar throughout the region. And last thing I'll quickly share before passing off to our panel of experts here is, in case you are interested in installing solar and you have not done so yet, it can sometimes be difficult to navigate the market of all the businesses that are out there that are offering solutions for your business. And so for that reason, NCSEA has developed a solar code of conduct in which all of our members have signed, ensuring that they are adhering to ethical sales and business practices and are doing right by the consumer. And so if you visit this website here, energync.org/solar code, you'll see all of the businesses that have signed that solar code of conduct. Rest assured, you can feel really good about working with these companies should you decide to install solar on your business moving forward. That being said, here's my contact information, and I will end my comments there so that we can get on to the rest of the folks who know a lot more about this subject than I do. So with that, the first person I do want to introduce is Carrie Stewart from Green State Power. And Carrie is Green State Power's managing partner, and Green State has just been doing a ton of fantastic work with businesses all across the state, helping them install so many really cool, innovative solutions, from parking lot solar canopies to solar installations on parking decks, on distribution centers. And so they're doing just great work all across the state. And so Green State has been one of my go-to installers in any questions that we have about the commercial solar space in North Carolina. So with that being said, Carrie, I want to pass it over to you to give folks a little bit of a preview of some of the work that y'all are doing and what they should know about as a business if they decide to move forward with solar. So Carrie, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Matt. Let me get this, see if I can get this playing. All right. Matt, can you just tell me if you can see that?
We can see it, but it's in presenter mode. So if you can switch it from presenter mode to just regular mode.
And for some reason the screens are not. We're just going to go from here because this is going to be, I don't think I can get it's not letting me move the screens over. I don't know why it won't let me move those. Oh, well, I'm not going to mess with technical difficulties on my end. It's completely mine. But what I will say is thank you to Matt. And we are, so we are a company located right here in Greensboro, North Carolina. We are really a specialty contractor. We only do commercial projects. We started in solar and really just kind of grew organically from there, mostly word of mouth. And I do love that Matt brought up that solar code of conduct, because, you know, I do think it's really important that you kind of stand by what you're going to put out there, and you're not kind of trying to oversell what is being produced. So making sure that you are working with a company or a contractor that can kind of stand behind their projections is really important. And we're really proud to, you know, work with NCSEA and partner, and thankful to maintain the reputation for solar in North Carolina and the Southeast. So a little bit about Green State Power. We're a small company, but we really have like a niche market because we just really focus on commercial. So we also do, while we also, you know, focus on the commercial solar, we also do the EV charging infrastructure projects, as well as LED lighting projects, which are really just kind of a lot of companies that are interested in doing commercial solar are also interested in energy savings associated with LED lighting and possibly EV charging. So it kind of goes hand in hand. And we like to be kind of the one-stop shop for all of that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of share some photos of some projects just to kind of give you an idea of the types of buildings and projects that you could put things on. One of the things that we, you know, have done, it used to be when we started this company in, you know, 2010, we were out there selling a financial product and trying to explain to everybody how the, you know, the rebates worked and how the tax credits and anything related to the payback of the system and why it was a good financial product. But, you know, people would have expressed interest in it, but they may not be able to set aside funding that would otherwise go towards piece of new equipment for their facility or something like that. So what we've seen now over the last little bit is that, you know, 5 years ago, a lot of these companies would sit down with their boards and they came up with some sustainable plans for goals that they've set for the company, which all sounded great, but then now they're coming back, you know, a few years later, 5 years later, maybe, and the boards are asking the leaders of the companies, okay, so what have you actually done on taking steps forward on these goals for sustainability? Obviously, the climate crisis is something that we see more and more each and every year through these crazy storms that we've had and all over. So, you know, what makes me feel good is that every project we do, you know, we're making one small step towards moving in the right direction and helping our overall community and planet. So now we're seeing companies that are coming to us and saying, okay, here's our budget. We have a budget already allocated. Let's see what we can do. How do we maximize the system size? And, you know, where can we place this system, or how can we, you know, let's say you have a couple of different facilities, which one might be the best location to locate solar, whether it's the utility company that's in that particular area, whether it's kind of what the facility looks like, what kind of, how old the roof is, all sorts of stuff like that can go into those decisions, and really just being involved on the front end on the planning is ideal for us, so that we can kind of do those assessments early. So here's some photos of just like a big distribution facility. We've got a trucking rooftop right there, even, you know, just a regular office building with a big, lots of offices. Here's some examples of what Matt was mentioning of some parking decks. And while the cost is a little bit higher when you do an installation on a parking deck because of the additional cost in steel, it does provide great shade for the cars underneath. It's a good visible sign. A lot of people can't see the solar panels on the roof, and sometimes companies really want that investment in clean energy to be very visible. So kind of be used as a marketing tool and stuff as well. This was kind of cool how we did that kind of solar wall that I thought was kind of fun on that parking structure. And then here's just some examples of EV buses and the transition as we move towards. I know this is a call on solar, but there's a lot of ways to improve your footprint or your carbon footprint and stuff like that. So just figured I would throw those in there as well, but I'm looking forward to answering additional questions and excited to be here on the panel and see how else I can help. Matt, I cannot remember who is next.
That is all right. I will take over and help to pass it on to our next panelists here. But one thing that Carrie mentioned, which is great, is being a smaller business, they can be really nimble to the situation or solutions that you all might need as a business, as you've seen in some of the images that Carrie just showed, right? Like these are very customized solutions based on the business needs that maybe other businesses might not be able to provide for you all, as some of these really unique, innovative parking canopy structures or EV bus charging solutions. So really, really cool to see all the work that they have been doing, especially in the Triad area.
Well, and Matt, and I'll make one other comment too, on that small business note, because we are a small business, I'm a small business owner and I wear a lot of hats. So while we have a great team that can kind of take the project from execution, like I also get all of the things that you as business owners are going through and making sure the payroll is run and doing all those, very essential things that all small business owners have to, handle and deal with. So we are with you.
And also at the same time, engaging with NCSEA and so many different things that we have going on. So I really appreciate all of the work that you and your team have been doing, Carrie. So we'll circle back around to you in just a little bit with some additional questions on some of y'all's work across North Carolina. So with that, I want to hand it off to Catherine from United Therapeutics. And Catherine helps to lead up ESG and sustainability related efforts for United Therapeutics, who's just really embraced sustainability and clean energy throughout the country, and also especially with their operations here in North Carolina, which I am always amazed to hear about the projects that they have already deployed on site at their RTP campus and things that they have in the wings coming up that they are deploying as well. So they are really practicing what they preach, and Catherine is here to talk a little bit about why sustainability is so important to United Therapeutics and some of the work that they are doing in this space. So Catherine, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt, and good morning, everybody. As Matt said, I'm Catherine Sheehy, and my role is to talk about United Therapeutics' social and environmental aspirations and performance and the governance of that, which is what the ESG in my title is all about. I'm also supporting internal strategy development around our public benefit corporation goals and aspirations, or PBC, and that's the second part of my title. But about United Therapeutics, for those who may not know a lot about us, Martine and Bina Rothblatt founded UT to save the life of their daughter, Genesis, who was 6 at the time of her diagnosis with a rare disease called pulmonary arterial hypertension. There were no good therapies at the time, the only cure being a lung transplant. So basically that was a terminal diagnosis. That was 28 years ago. And you can see by this photo that Genesis, who's on the left, she's well. And through our work and the work of others, we've raised awareness and consequently the diagnosis of the disease. And today we serve more than 15,000 patients on our therapies. We rechartered as a public benefit corporation in 2021 to codify that founding inspiration. Really serves everything that we do. So what is that purpose? It's to create a brighter future for our patients through the development of novel pharmaceutical therapies and technologies that expand the availability of transplantable organs. So the first purpose really helps delay or avoid the need for a transplant, while the second purpose enables patients to have a transplant when they need one. So you'll see on the left-hand side the number of patients in the US who are afflicted with the rare diseases that we cover. And on the right, you can see that, when we solve the organ shortage crisis, and by shortage, I mean 17 people die daily on the waiting list for an organ transplant, not to mention many others who can't even get on the list, we could potentially be saving even more lives than we are today. Here's a few highlights from our current corporate responsibility and public benefit report. I'm not going to go through these details, and I think you'll receive the slides afterwards, but I do want to point out that we align our ESG priorities with our PBC purpose and goals, which correspond with these 4 pillars that you see on the page. So patients, one of our PBC goals is to make sure no patient gets left behind, ever. We understand that we can't achieve this highest purpose without the bright, creative people who do the work, and that's why another goal is to be a destination employer. Studies show the links, and we read the science between human health and environmental health, which is why we have a PBC goal to operate sustainably. And you can see our progress in this area, and this is the focus of our talk today, obviously. 26% of our portfolio is LEED certified today. And of course, we do this ethically. Now, our planet pillar has long had support from the very top. Our CEO, Martine Rothblatt, leads us in this thinking, that we can do this work without harming the planet. And it's this idea that sits behind the building that I really want to focus on in our conversation today. While it was in project phase, it was dubbed Project Lightyear, and that was named after Buzz Lightyear from the Toy Story because of his catchphrase, to infinity and beyond. It's now called Phase 5. It actually is in operation on our campus in RTP, and it's, to my knowledge, the only cold storage good manufacturing practice warehouse that is LEED Gold certified, as far as I'm aware. Now, I'm going to go through some of the details related to the building, but I'd be remiss to say that the effort and success was really UT's alone. It was not. We're grateful to have worked really collaboratively with all the folks, the partners listed here, and in constant conversation with regulatory authorities. But first, the why. So we have a 2-year inventory commitment to make sure our patients never go without their therapies. And that's linked to our goal of leaving no patient behind. We launched a new therapy called Tyvaso DPI in 2021, and we needed more warehouse storage. So that was the only absolute requirement in this list. And to meet that requirement, it had to meet US FDA good manufacturing practices regulations, and those relate to drug quality and safety. You can see, though, across the next 6 goals that sustainability topics ranked really high, higher even than budget, and which is at number 4 on this list. And this priority list was critical to the success of the project from a sustainability perspective. And it's a really mighty list if you even just consider each of these individually, daunting. And it had never been done before. Until now, that is. So I've shared an article with the team that goes into the details, even some of the team's modeling decisions, and you'll get access to that article so you can actually read about those things. And I'm happy to answer questions after the fact or connect you with our experts. But here's a couple of highlights. The team selected the site, which was an underutilized field house on our property, to maximize adaptive reuse and limit ecosystem impacts. And they considered and used multiple active and passive design strategies to lower energy use intensity. And they used a lot of on-site solar, almost 0.5 megawatt capacity. Going back to that resilience note that Matt started with related to solar. So the Tesla Megapacks, backup battery storage, and our Schneider Electric microgrid, they're all designed to work together to enable this building to actually operate without grid power if there were a power outage, without the use of backup fossil fuel. So with that, I am really happy to be part of this conversation. Here's a couple links to learn more about us, and I look forward to talking more.
Great. Thank you so much, Catherine. And I just am just so impressed by all of the work that your team has done to deploy these technologies already and have them on site and not just talk about doing something further down the road. And it's incredible that these projects like Project Light here is right here in our backyard in RTP in North Carolina. So thank you. And I feel honored to have you joining us as part of this presentation here this morning. So with that, I want to pass it off to our last speaker on the panel this morning before we dive into a Q&A, who is Nick Jimenez from the Southern Environmental Law Center. And Nick is a senior attorney over at SELC. And Nick is probably the most knowledgeable person on customer or commercial customer clean energy programs in North Carolina, and has really been digging in on so many of these programs over the past couple of years, from things like Green Source Advantage, a program in which some of y'all might have heard of, to things like community solar. And so I'd encourage y'all, if you have any questions about what is going on the corporate clean energy program space, to reach out to Nick, as he's been just incredibly helpful in this space and has just been a tireless advocate for continuing to find new programs to help businesses across the state meet their own clean energy, sustainability, and resiliency goals. So with that, Nick, I want to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for the kind intro. Let's see if I can confidently share my slides. Are y'all seeing that?
We are.
Great. Okay. So as Matt alluded to, I wanted to tell you a little bit about Green Source Advantage Choice, now it's called, and mention one new development that's in kind of earlier days, which is commercial property assessed capital expenditure, in other places known as property assessed clean energy. I'm going to spend a little more time on Green Source Advantage Choice because there are kind of new developments and that is live for y'all. So before I kind of get into the details, a lot of what we've my co-panelists have been talking about are on-site clean energy, rooftop solar and various other clean energy and energy efficiency improvements you can make. But another option is programs through your utility. And so these are for Duke Energy customers, which is most of the state. So I'm going to, and that can be very useful if you don't have the, the kind of roof space that you might want, or maybe you don't know the building, or you have different kind of level of commitment you want to make. So I'm going to tell you a little about this program, and then there's a kind of snag that it has hit that I think folks should be aware of. So this is the Green Source Advantage Choice is a kind of revamp of a pre-existing program called Green Source Advantage that we've had since, I believe, 2017, which was our last major energy legislation before major energy legislation in 2021. So that is the gist of the program is what's called a sleeved PPA in the industry, which is that's a power purchase agreement where you, as a large customer of, in this case, Duke Energy, can enter a power purchase agreement with a third-party developer, say a solar developer, but you're kind of going through the utility. At least I believe that's the sleeve, is the utility. So I have a little graphic on what that kind of looks like. This, all credit to Duke. This is Duke's current graphic for Green Source Advantage Choice. It's basically the same. They have you in the middle. I think, to my mind, a more intuitive graphic has the utility in the middle, and you're sort of going to the developer. But you enter an agreement. You say, "I'll pay you a certain price for a long, over the long term for electricity from your facility." The electricity has to go onto the system because we have a traditional vertically integrated monopoly utility system in the state. So that just goes out to everybody, and then the utility credits you back basically the value of the electricity that the facility that you contracted with is putting onto the grid, minus some fees. So that program was relatively successful in its first iteration. I had some customers, some of y'all might be on the line today. It was revamped. That's the big, most recent big energy legislation I mentioned in 2021, House Bill 951. It did two things relevant for our purposes today. One, it set carbon reduction requirements for the electric power sector, for the utility. It said get to 70% below 2005 emissions levels by 2030 and net zero by 2050. And that's a whole proceeding that we just finished, the most recent iteration of. It's a long-term, the way they look at that is in a long-term planning proceedings. You look out 15 years and now all the way to 2050. What do you plan to retire? What are you going to build? And let's make sure that the emissions meet those deadlines. And there are plenty of wrinkles I could talk about that Matt at least is well aware of on that trajectory. The other thing that the law did is it said, why don't you do some new voluntary customer programs? And so one of the ones that Duke proposed, and the only one that's been approved so far, is Green Source Advantage Choice. It says here kind of the same thing. I have this note about the renewable energy credits that you can get through it. So under kind of longstanding North Carolina law, renewable energy credits, which is, it's just a way to keep track of credit for energy generated by a qualifying type of resource, like a solar farm. Usually tracked by the megawatt hour. 1 megawatt hour of electricity generated by a solar farm is going to give you 1 REC. North Carolina, for historically and under law, has not counted the associated carbon reductions from those RECs. So to include those, they came up with this new term, clean energy and environmental attributes. Duke kind of made that up. That's not a term you'll see elsewhere, because in the rest of the country, RECs include carbon attributes. So you can get those. Here's the problem: a regulatory surplus. It's the kind of wonky term of art for this. I won't read this to you. It's easily Googleable on the EPA's webpage. But the gist is, are you doing something that is, when you participate in this program, are you getting the utility to do something more than it would have otherwise done just to comply with the law? And the problem is, the way this program is designed, not really. The regular Green Source Advantage Choice program is designed to subtract the megawatts from participating customers from the next year's annual solar procurement. They do these annual competitive solar procurements for that long-term planning process. And they have a target each year that's set by that trajectory. And say the target next year is 1,500 megawatts. You get 100 megawatts this year in your subscription, it's going to drop it down to 1,400 next year. So you're not really getting them to do more than business as usual. They're also counting the emissions. So we raised this. This was a big question in the proceeding for almost 2 years. And two of the big obstacles that Duke raised are the modeling. It says, look, we have one big system. We can't be dealing with trying to, when we model out our resources, deal with a set of resources that are just for customers and for us, or for everybody else. And then interconnection. They say, look, to meet these carbon reduction requirements, we've got to connect as much as we feasibly can each year, and so we just can't practically connect more. There are solutions to those concerns. I won't get deeply into them for time reasons right now, but happy to talk about them offline or in Q&A. The gist of one of them is you don't model them separately, but you do attribute a certain amount of emissions to the resources that participate in these customer programs that would be counted on Duke's ledger for 951 compliance. So that way you're avoiding the double counting of the emissions, where the customer participating is saying, look, I did this, I get these RECs or CEEAs now, and I'm reducing my carbon emissions. And then Duke at the same time, Duke's not counting that same REC, but it is at the same time saying, yeah, we reduced our emissions by that amount to comply with 951. You get around that. And then we came up with a number of creative ways to get around interconnection limits, which we might take issue with in their own right. So there was one small step in the right direction that came out of this proceeding, largely as a result of our advocacy. SCLC, we represented the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. We worked hand in hand with NCSEA on this. We were not part of this settlement, but I think it's safe to say it wouldn't have happened without our advocacy, where there's a little acceleration. So instead of that subtracting the capacity from the next year, it says we won't do that. If you select this resource acceleration option within Green Source Advantage choice, it will just be on top of what we were going to procure that year, and we won't subtract it. But it's going to come from the losing bids in that year's procurement. So that project wouldn't have happened otherwise. It won't be subtracted, but it will be rolled into the baseline the next time we do modeling, which is every 2 years. So when that next modeling happens, the very complex model is going to say, look, we have this extra solar online. We don't need quite as much in the future years. So it doesn't quite get to where it needs to, but it is a step in the right direction. Last thing I want to say is just briefly on this CPACE program. So here's a law. This is just in a law. It came into law recently. The gist is it's a financing mechanism to make clean energy and I guess more broadly capital expenditures a little more affordable. Local government turns it into an assessment, turns a lien into an assessment on your property, but all the financing and the servicing of that is done by a private entity. So it's kind of a way to leverage private capital. Here's the key thing to know about it at this stage, I think, is that it requires the local government to join the state's CPACE program. So you need that to happen first. And there's more, just to keep an eye out. There is more information coming from the statewide operator. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested in using that to fund some on-site improvements. With that, I will relinquish the screen and thank you for your attention.
Great. Thanks, Nick. As you all can see, there's a lot going on, and hence the reason why it's important to have partners like SCLC staying on top of this at the commission and at the legislature. There are definitely some challenges, as Nick highlighted, but there's also a lot to be optimistic for looking forward, like CPACE, which provides a unique financing option to especially help with cash flow should you decide to move forward with installing large solar projects or other clean energy projects on site. All right, so we do have a little bit of time for some Q&A. And I've got some questions that I've put together for our panelists, but I would encourage folks who are joining in this morning, if you do have any questions, please feel free to utilize the Q&A functionality on the Zoom webinar, where you'll be able to ask a question, and we'll share that out with the relevant panelist here this morning. So first up, I do want to pose a question to Carrie, which is, when a business approaches Green State Power about potentially installing solar, what often are their primary motives? Cost savings, sustainability, or something else that we haven't talked about?
Well, it really varies on the entity, and whether all of those come into play. Obviously, energy savings is a big one. The sustainability. And right now, sustainability is top of mind for probably the majority of the customers that we are engaged in working with. But energy savings and the financial return are obviously involved in that as well. And I will just ping to Nick, actually, if I really appreciated that kind of some of those details of some of the more current stuff going on. But can you shed some light on just some of the more kind of basic incentives for the commercial business owners, like the tax credits and the bonus depreciation and stuff like that, for anyone on the call that might not be aware of those kind of low direct incentives?
Yeah, the ones I've focused on are the investment tax credits through the Inflation Reduction Act. So, and we've turned that into we're working on a whole strategy because it's so potentially rich to bring resources to, to our region and spur further development. So the investment tax credit is based on the capital cost of the expenditure you're making. And it's basically a discount, a percentage of that cost that you can have as a tax credit. So the baseline is 30% as long as your developer meets certain criteria for prevailing wage and apprenticeship, which I understand they're all working very hard to do, because if they don't do that, it's 6%. There's a huge difference. And then we like to call it a layer cake. There's kind of a stack of tax credits that you can go after. I think for the purposes here, some of them might not be relevant, like if you're guaranteeing half of the benefits go to low income customers. But if you are interested in that, I'd be happy to talk to you. We've worked on some models where, if you wanted to kind of jerry rig your own community solar program that might fit that bill, let me know. But there are others, like if you're in what they call an energy community, where you're near a coal plant that closed in the past, I think it's since 2010, you can get an extra 10%. If you have a developer that can use domestic content, you can get another 10%. So they can stack up quite high. I mean, you can get to 50, as high as 70%, at least in theory. It's pretty hard to hit that bullseye, but it's a huge discount on solar. And I think the other important thing to know in terms of those credits, and just for everyone here, is the IRA established transferability for those. So in the past, you could, if you were a relatively small business and you didn't have the tax appetite to take advantage of like a 50% tax credit on a solar system, you could enter an equity partnership with a larger company that did have that tax appetite, which has a lot of transaction costs associated with it. But the IRA basically says now you can just sell your tax credit, and you do take a little bit of a haircut. It's it's something like 10 to 15% from what I've heard, but it's much easier, and you don't have to go through all those hoops. So I think there are huge discounts available.
And I'll piggyback on that as well. Another thing that they added was for nonprofits, that they can take advantage of the tax credit even though they are not have their own tax liability. They will basically get a check from the government as whatever their tax credit would have been. It can kind of act as like a rebate check, which is really amazing.
Yeah, that direct pay provision has definitely been something that has really encouraged more nonprofits, local governments to take advantage of solar projects or other renewable projects. I dropped a link in the chat to NCSEA. We've got a great member, Lucas Tax and Energy Consulting, who is incredibly familiar with all of the ins and outs of tax incentives and various incentives and provisions within the IRA that might apply specifically to your business. And so I'd encourage you to reach out to them as well if you have some of those questions to talk in more detail about. So my next question is to the business that is represented here on the phone today, and Catherine over at UT. So from a sustainability perspective, how does United Therapeutics prioritize the projects you'd like to move forward with next? Is it based on largest potential cost savings, meeting carbon emissions reduction goals? What does that prioritization process look like for you all?
Yeah, thanks. We have a metric and a commitment underneath our public benefit corporation goals, right? So to operate sustainably is a public benefit goal. Underneath that, we've got a commitment to site net zero energy new construction where feasible. There's a big asterisk. The asterisk is relates to what we're trying to achieve. And so our objectives, we always set out or set a priority objectives like the ones I shared about phase 5, Project Lightyear. There's always that set of priorities that we're trying to meet, and they vary based on whatever it is that we're trying to build. So for example, the warehouse sustainability attributes were top of the list outside of the topmost priority, which is really about meeting patient needs. So patient needs are always going to be top of list for anything that we do. Cost savings are generally not the way that we talk about our priorities. But we obviously are interested in cost savings, energy savings. I mean, as you mentioned, the cost of energy is increasing. That's happening everywhere. We're negotiating contracts for certain properties now, and the price of per kilowatt hour is just really bumped considerably. So we feel it and understand it. And as the kind of company that we are, and committed to our public benefit purpose, the reason why we want to save that money is so we can reinvest that money in organ manufacturing work or other R&D related to our pharmaceutical therapies. And the margin, if you decrease those margins, you are not able to invest as much. And so it's super important for us to try to manage this as closely and well as we can. But generally speaking, sustainability is always in our list of considerations. It may not always be the top set of priorities like the warehouse was, but it often is. So like there's another piece of construction that's happening in our TP. There would be a manufacturing facility, and we're aiming for mass timber construction, which hasn't been done before in quite the way that we're envisioning it. So that we're happy. I mean, I feel quite lucky that we have such a strong commitment to sustainability, because it really does go back to the human health impacts that are at the core of why we do what we do.
Thanks, Catherine. I'll also just draw folks' attention to the chat. I dropped a comment in there from Shannon O'Shea talking about the value of community development financial institutions as partners, financial partners on these types of projects moving forward. So I dropped her contact information in the chat as well. So if folks want to reach out, please feel free to do so. And I would say one maybe last question for the group here in a very, very maybe abbreviated answer, because we are running up against time. I'll at least start with Nick on this, and Carrie and Catherine, if y'all want to jump in, would love y'all's thoughts and maybe like a 30-second answer. So, Nick, we talked about some of the challenges and maybe also the lack of programs that are currently available through the utility here in North Carolina. But just in general, like what are some of the most common challenges that you hear about from businesses in the state who are interested in moving forward with clean energy projects or have really robust clean energy goals, but are maybe struggling to meet those goals?
Well, yeah, I think this is the challenge. But backing up a little bit, I mean, because we have this regulated monopoly utility structure, these are your options, what the utility offers and gets approved at the Utilities Commission. So I think what I've heard from large customers who want either more than their site can host, or just would participate in a utility-led program, is that they want those RECs, including carbon attributes, and if they can't get them in North Carolina, they're just going to get them on the national market, meaning from developed, clean energy that's developed in other states. We're just effectively outsourcing our local clean energy, and I think that's not the cutting edge of corporate sustainability goals. And what I'm hearing, they don't really want to do that. There's this whole 24/7 matching for clean energy and emissions first. There are a bunch of kind of new schools of thought that are pushing things forward, but it's a challenge to be able to access those. There's some new tariffs that that they're working on negotiating that are coming up in the fall, but I think that's an expression of this frustration with the kind of limited options so far.
Carrie, was there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Well, I guess I would just add, kind of, as if we're talking to the business owners or considering doing solar, and most of them in North Carolina, a couple of things that I just kind of keyed in beforehand, that before we get off the call, to one of the biggest things we get is the age of the roof. If you're putting it on the roof, you want to make sure that we don't want to install a system that we'd need to take off before it's paid for itself. So we want to make sure that you have at least kind of 10 years of roof life, well, preferably a new roof. That's definitely something that you should consider. Also, just looking at your utility, your energy bill, your tax liability, and what kind of budget you've got. Those are, some of the things to think about. But I mean, I will say, the majority of our customers are rooftop or, net meter systems. So it's keeping it in North Carolina on site on your facility, and the sizing of the system is a really important part of that needs to be done on the front end and can be done for new construction. You just have to have, an energy study done and making sure that it's sized appropriately. So those are kind of my last little tidbits.
That sounds great. And, if as a business you are running up against any obstacles or challenges, I'd encourage you to reach out to this panel of experts or to be engaged in organizations like NCSEA, where we are advocating for stronger corporate customer clean energy programs across the state to help companies meet their own sustainability goals. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the panel here and pass it over to Heather. But thank you all to each of our panelists and to the attendees for joining us this morning. And Heather, I will just flag that a question was asked from someone in the audience about whether they will receive slides and contact information afterwards. So back over to you, Heather. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you to Matt and Catherine and Carrie and Nick. I hope you will all leave here feeling like there are resources, whatever your question is. The answer is out there. It might be complicated, but it is out there and someone will help navigate you through it. But thank you all for spending the time with us. Absolutely. The slides, this webinar is recorded, and so it will be shared out to those who are on the call today. And then also all of the content from Climate Week will be available to everyone who participated in any sessions. So I hope that if you're not able to participate in all the sessions, you will take advantage of that resource. Melissa just put in the chat, please take this last minute that you carved out for us to take a 4-question, I think, survey. Super simple, but is super important to us and how we continue to offer these educational opportunities and ways to directly engage people in climate solutions. And then my last note to you is that the next session is at 12 o'clock on health, comfort, and affordability in your home and getting those things through energy efficiency. And we have a great lineup there as well. So thank you everyone for your time. Please take that survey and we'll hopefully see you later in the week.